Hey, you there? Come on, wake up already! It's almost time, we need you! Fine, I'll wait a few months. Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, we recently finally had a proper announcement of a big old DLC coming to Elden Ring. As of the moment, we have limited concept of the full scope of it all, but given what we do know, the theoretical time travel based nature of it all, it is quite likely that this will be pretty massive, and it could cover multiple areas of the map that we already have, but back in time, with notable changes based on the lore that we already have. This gives us lots to speculate on, lots of expectations, but personally I have a few hopes that aren't even related to the story or progression of the DLC itself. So today let's bundle all that together and go over my sort of wish list for the DLC. The 10 things I think need to be a part of the DLC to make it feel whole, complete, and satisfying. Without further ado then, let's begin with number 1, Forgotten Spell Types. There are tons of sorceries and incantations in the base game, but there are a few categories that are simply missing some love. Things like fire and lightning incantations or glintstone magic are understandably very fleshed out. There's a lot to do with that, but there are some categories of magic that are woefully underutilized, and hopefully that's because they plan to focus on them in the DLC. But if they weren't planning to, I hope they still will flesh these out now. I'm talking about things like blood sorceries, of which there are only 2, death sorceries, and things like ghost flame, godskin incantations, and even beast incantations. I would love more beast incantations. The magic system in this game is already quite expansive, but there are definitely some sections that are a bit left behind, and I'd just love to see those expanded upon. Number 2.
I take no pleasure in hurting such a worthy foe.
Full Power Fire Giant and Placidusax. Specifically, these are a couple of bosses that I'd like to fight in the DLC. We're probably a little bit too off of the right timeline to actually see Placidusax in his prime, but if we did get to fight him properly, that would be pretty awesome. The Placidusax fight in base game is already one of my favorites in the game, but in that fight, he's clearly significantly wounded already, maimed even, missing multiple heads and various parts of his body, which theoretically results in him being weaker than he would have been in his prime. A prime Placidusax would be an awesome fight to witness. On top of that, of course, is Fire Giant, a major boss fight in the story, but again, this is significantly weaker Fire Giant than they were known to be, the last one remaining of an entire army of potential Fire Giants. Imagine a proper high-tier Fire Giant fight, a Fire Giant of legend, rather than just the one that happens to still be alive after all of this time. Number 3, Trick Weapons. Of course, this is a main staple of Bloodborne, but there's nothing saying they couldn't bring this concept into Elden Ring itself. For those out of the know, a trick weapon is a weapon that can essentially turn into a whole different weapon at the press of a button. An example is something like the Rifle Spear, which can transform between a spear and a rifle with a bayonet on the end, or the classic Saw Cleaver, which in Elden Ring terms essentially transformed from an axe into a halberd. Considering what Ashes of War are in this game, especially the weapon unique ones, you could totally just make a weapon that has the trick weapon function built in as its unique skill, and it'd be pretty cool to have. As a concept, trick weapons are great, and I'd love to see some again. Number 4, Good Scythes. Scythes as a weapon class are a bit underrepresented in the game. They aren't necessarily bad by any means, but there aren't many of them, and compared to pretty much every other weapon type, there aren't any that scream powerful, any that are worth building entirely around for any other reason than liking scythes, and that is a bit of a shame. There are some really fun possibilities for scythes as a concept, some really cool opportunities for unique Ashes of War that fit what scythes are, but it just isn't being taken advantage of in the current roster of weapons, especially when you consider Bloodborne had the Amygdalin Arm added in its DLC, which is a ridiculously cool scythe that extends out and reaches forward as it transforms into a proper scythe. Something like that would be an incredible addition to Elden Ring in my opinion. Number 5.
I've been flailing.
Good flails. Whereas scythes I can firmly say are decent, flails in Elden Ring have been left behind every other weapon category in so many ways. While some of the weapon categories are a bit rough, they generally have redeeming qualities, whereas unfortunately, flails are just pretty bad. The arguably best flail is Bastard Stars, and it is just generally worse than the curved sword equivalent with a similar effect. Their moveset is pretty bad, low reach, low range, not great angles that they come out in, and not great damage. They just aren't really worth using, and that's coming from someone that absolutely absolutely loves flails as a concept. It's one of my favorite types of historical weaponry, so I really hope in the DLC we get some proper flails. Either a change to the moveset of flails as a whole to make them a bit better, or even just one or two exceptionally good flails that we can mess around with, you know? Number 6, Godskins and Black Flame. Based on the time period we're going back to, it's entirely possible we'll get far deeper into the lore and existence of the Godskins, those who served under the Dusk-Eyed Queen in an attempt to slay all of the gods and demigods, and, well, the thing is, back in this specific time period, they were extremely successful at doing so. The reason they are called Godskins now is because they literally wear the skins of the gods that they've killed. But the thing is, in the present period of the game, they are significantly nerfed. Their leader is nowhere to be found, and the Black Flame itself, which is their main god-killing tool, was lowered in power heavily by Marika removing the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. So it would be really cool to see these fellows in their heyday running on full power, and possibly even the Dusk-Eyed Queen in proper glory. Number 7.
I'm so sorry, Your Holiness.
No holy resistant bosses. This one is easy. A vast majority of the last few endgame bosses of Elden Ring are insanely resistant to holy, to the point that it really just screws over anyone who went for a holy based build. Of course it makes sense within the story and the lore, so it's not really worth complaining about, but it still sucks. So as far as the DLC goes, I hope we have minimal bosses that resist holy damage to this extent. Maybe a few more that resist bleed, just because, well, bleed is super strong. We all know it's super strong, so a boss here or there that can't be bled or has high bleed resistance isn't really a bad idea. Number 8, Storm King Giant War Eocade. And this is of course due to the time period in which the DLC seems to be set. If speculations are right, we're going back to before Marika was a god, a time in which the Storm King reigned upon his throne. Eocade was a proper faction and not just the slight remnants left in the shaded castle, and well, the fire giants numbered in the thousands or more, as opposed to the one remaining one that we fight in the story of the base game, like I said earlier. So to put it simply, given the potential of this time period, I just hope it explores all of these avenues. Really, this isn't really about specific bosses, more so than specific lore I'd like to get a deeper look at and actually see within the game in actual cutscenes or just events of enemies fighting each other. I hope we dive into actually seeing the giant war, actually seeing what Stormvale was like back in this time, all of it. The base game has so much lore about the history of this land, and we're diving deeply into the history as part of the DLC, so I hope it takes advantage of the rich lore that it has already laid down upon us. Number 9, Cancelable Ashes of War. This is a simple one, more for PvP than anything else, but also nice for PvE. I hope that we see a lot of new weapons with their abilities to cancel out the animation of their Ashes of War. It's something that they've been patching in a lot to a lot of weapons that are in the base game already, update after update, simply letting you roll and cancel the animation after it started so you don't have to commit overly hard. This is obviously great in PvP as it lets you fake out your opponents, but it's also great for PvE because it lets you play just a bit more recklessly as long as your reflexes are on point for canceling when you need to. Number 10, Torrent Customization. And finally today is something that I see people asking for all the time, the simple ability to edit the aesthetics of Torrent, your trusty steed. Personally, I just think you should wear a little hat or something. I'd be happy with that, but I know people would love to have way more in-depth ability to properly change up the look of Torrent, maybe even make it look like a giant dog or something if they feel like it. And that's it, everyone. 10 things that I think need to be in Elden Ring DLC for it to feel properly complete and satisfying. What about you? Do you agree with the things that I've laid out here? What are your own ideas that you think are must-includes for a proper DLC to this wonderful game? Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.